Hi, Mike Eddy with your environmental health and safety. Here to talk a little bit about sewage spill and response for everybody working in the facility services area. So, just a couple of things here that mainly related to plumbing activities and cleanup. Most of the body fluids directed under sewage is not really regulated by OSHA under their bloodborne pathogen standard unless blood is present, or we can articulate why. Um, Something that could be covered in blood or have other fluids that would fall under that. However, because there are several diseases associated with exposure to sewage, um, certain employees who are involved in plumbing and cleaning activities will be provided personal protective equipment to prevent contact, and they should be wearing that in the instances that we're covering. So employees who clear drain blockages on an individual basis on a single unit like plunging, it's not considered an occupational exposure to blood or other materials unless there is blood present there, then it would be. So just remember that until the scope gets to a certain level, as long as we can protect ourselves in the minimal effort there, it's not considered an exposure. There are ways that we can protect even those exposures, which we'll get to. Workers who snake drains, however, have the potential for that exposure with the provisions of the bloodborne pathogen standard, so they are considered an exposure risk when you're snaking. So the appropriate PPE, gloves, eye protection, boots, coveralls will be made available and should be worn during clearing of blockages. So OPIM, other potentially infectious materials, this is where we're starting to worry about bloodborne pathogen stuff here. This is outside of the sewage realm. You can see these different fluids in there. Those are all considered infectious materials that would fall under a higher standard under OSHA's bloodborne pathogen. So drain repairs, flushing. Obviously, we in drain repairs for sewage, we want to flush those pipes with hot water prior to any maintenance if we can. We want to wear and protect ourselves with heavy gloves before we start breaking systems. You wouldn't want to wear rubber gloves to start breaking pipe. That's not going to protect you from any of that breaking material. If drain traps are removed, make sure that we inspect the contents to make sure there's no blood or other infectious materials or sharps or either other chemicals that might be in there if we're looking at some of the traps in, let's say, the science building. Immediately place any of those sharp objects you might find in a trap or otherwise in a backup in a sharp container that's puncture proof. We want to separate our hands from handling those objects using a pair of tongs, use a piece of cardboard, or any other type of material that we could scrape or pick it up with to get it out of our way. We just don't want to handle it with our hands if we can help it, unless you're wearing the appropriate glove to do that. You want to handle all contaminated materials, like I said, separating your hands from there if you can. So drain repairs in laboratories where there's some infectious microorganisms, we do have them here. We want to take additional protective measures when we're messing around with those. The chemical hygiene officer over at the science building he would be our best bet for contact prior to cleanup, but before we did work there, he can tell us what might be present. His name is Mark Mooser. He's at extension 4019. We want to confirm with those laboratory personnel or Mark if there is a backup or any chemical or microorganism present that they were able to decontaminate what they were able to, or what they have decontaminated prior to entry into the lab before you start doing drain repair work. Wear the appropriate goggles, face masks, coveralls, goggles that seal the eyes, mask before we start those repairs. And if the likelihood that like I said, if we're going to have any splashing or anything that's going to make contact with clothing, this is where we want to wear the Tyvek suit, the single Tyvek suit with the boots attached to protect your clothing and everything else on you during those events. So there are health risks. These are the viruses associated with the raw sewage. Hepatitis A lives for months on surfaces, causes significant liver damage, and it can kill you. Um, that's one we're protecting against on raw sewage if it's present. Rotavirus, um, basically the hand-to-mouth type of route, same as hepatitis, ingestion, can survive for a couple days. You're seeing a lot of flu-like symptoms, fever, diarrhea, vomiting, uh, muscle soreness, that type of thing. Norwalk virus, also known as the norovirus, is a stomach flu type of virus that's transmitted same route by hand to mouth and ingestion, and can survive for about a week. Again, it's a lot of flu-like symptoms that you're going to notice. By the way, if we have an exposure and somebody gets sick after sewage cleanup, this is a work comp case, so I should be contacted. We should be documenting this, and the college should be paying for all the medical bills and treatment that would be necessary to mitigate any of the symptoms or to work your way through these. So some of the other health risks, a lot of bacterial type of risks are common in sewage, E. coli and salmonella, headache, fatigue, nausea, a lot of flu-like symptoms. Same with leptospirosis. It's another bacteria, kind of nasty, can do some damage to your liver and kidneys. That's present in sewage. Occupational asthma, this is kind of an acute asthma attack from breathing in the organisms, any living or dead bacteria or organisms that might be in the air. And here's some of the symptoms: chest tightness and wheezing, kind of an acute asthma attack. Also skin infections and rashes on the skin, or an eye infection like a pink eye, or a specific type of eye infection can occur from certain types of bacteria. Rarely we're going to have the ultra acute asthma attack where you start having inflammation of the lung tissue. It's a very serious matter, and you get a fever. It's an acute bacterial pneumonia of sorts that you need treatment for. So these are just some of the other risks associated with sewage. How do they enter the body? Well, from the previous slides there, especially the viral ones, most of them are hand-to-mouth contact. When you're eating, drinking, smoking, wiping your face with contaminated surfaces, or sneezing and licking your lips. That's why the mask is so important to cover up that area to avoid contact. Any cuts or scrapes or open wounds that you have on your arms or legs, obviously being stuck with a hypodermic needle would put you at some risk. Aerosols refers to the aeration of any of those materials, any of the sewage materials in the air, where small droplets can land on your eyes or nose and mouth and your mucous membranes and make their way into the body. Same thing, you can breathe them in when you aerate some of those products of sewage, some of the liquid. So who's at risk? Everybody that's listening to this training is at risk. Anybody that's inspecting lines or doing maintenance on work, especially when there's a stoppage or a backup. Some of our construction workers should be aware that when they're doing the work and they're repairing or replacing lines, that they're putting themselves at some risk. A sewer spill cleanup from our housekeepers, and obviously any of the plumbing work. So PPE required for the cleanups. Most of this we've covered throughout the presentation. First and foremost, we want it available when you need it, instead of trying to figure out what to do after an issue occurs. So waterproof boots and coveralls. We're trying to order the single Tyvek suits with the boots attached, so that's kind of an all-in-one. Utility gloves, I'd like to see them snap up close to the elbow. I don't want you using those lightweight latex or nitrile gloves. I want you having some ones that are a little heavier duty and sealing off either up to the forearm and the elbow. Goggles that seal around the face, or a mask that will seal around the face to protect yourself from any aeration of chemicals. And then the other other pieces you're cleaning disinfected. It's usually a bleach type of solution. There are some manufactured products that do the same thing. They're typically 9 parts water to 1 part bleach. So the cleanup of disinfected areas that have been flooded with sewage, again, it's not considered a bloodborne activity unless, of course, we see blood present. Then that changes the nature of it. We should follow the following procedures for cleanup of sewage. Let's make sure that we stage an area outside of the contaminated area. That should be our area where we're allowing ourselves to set up and take down a clean area, and then kind of a contaminated area that we would clean after the fact. For putting on of your clean PPE and removal of your contaminated PPE and coveralls and all the items we're going to discard. We're trying to get into the habit of, if we can, to have items that we would just discard after their use instead of having to be decontaminated and reused later. I think this would just be a simpler task if we can do it that way. But it should be available to us. We want to keep the staging area, one part of it contaminant free and one of it where we're going to remove contaminated items to keep that separation of the staging area. Any grossly contaminated PPE should be changed and discarded. The same thing would be for your personal clothing. So you don't want to trunk contaminated shoes all around the college. We would want to remove those or get them cleaned or disinfected and have them removed at the point where we're staging. Disinfecting area is the next to the clean area. So we have our clean area, then we have the area where we're going to kind of disinfect ourselves if necessary to remove our old clothing or our contaminated items that we're wearing, and discard them in plastic bags. They can be thrown away with regular trash unless there's other contaminants beyond sewage that would not allow us to do that. I just want to get you familiar with a pump truck, just in case you guys haven't seen this. On occasion, I guess we would call a service to pump out any standing material that we could not remove or could not clear on our own through an open drain. So this is what a pump truck looks like. Sealed mechanism. The operator of the pump truck, it's a vacuum. There's certain parts of that vacuum that they have where it's only going to allow it to go one way so that it won't pop out and leak everywhere. And the operator should be in charge of that to make sure that there's no spray back or flow back out of the tank, either onto the operator or onto the college property, or recontaminating other areas. I just wanted you to be familiar with that. So if we're causing any splashing, this is where we want to wear the face shields and the coveralls. We want gloves on for all sewage cleanups, whether minor or standing. Anything greater than 1/8 of an inch of standing sewage material, we want to wear the boots and we want to wear the Tyvek coveralls for those activities. Remove the solid materials when we're cleaning. We're going to remove those from the floors either by way of wet vac, broom, squeegee, and we can dispose of them into any functioning sanitary drain or sink. We obviously don't want to collect those and dump them outside or put them in any common area where somebody else can get sick or contaminated. Any material within the sewage area that books, papers, other things that cannot be cleaned by hard surface, they need to be discarded. If anybody has a problem with that, or there's a staff member or somebody else who wants to take control of those items that have been contaminated and cannot be cleaned, they can contact me and I'll talk to them. Those items will not be on the college at all. We're going to get rid of those and throw them away, or they're going to have to remove them from the site. So obviously we want to watch for blood or other infectious materials that might be present that could contain blood or other types of bodily fluids that would kind of up the ante on a cleanup effort here. So feminine hygiene products, razors, sharps, anything that could be blood, old bandages, we want to get those things out of the way. We want to handle those with care. Separate mechanically our hands from those items to remove them and throw them away by placing them in a puncture-resistant container, labeling it, throwing a biohazard sticker on it, and maybe having health and wellness. They can help do that. And if wet, we want to make sure it's leak-proof. After we're done with the solid material cleanup, we want to apply our either manufactured product or a bleach solution to all surfaces that came in contact with sewage. Those hard surfaces should be wiped clean, and then they left to dry following the application of whatever solution we're going to use. They say if it's a large site, use that 10% bleach solution. I'd say use 10% bleach solution if we're cleaning up any sewage, or the manufactured chemical that was designed for that intention. Again, the simple one is 1 part bleach to 9 parts of water. We would not want to use bleach on fabrics or carpets or anything that can be stained with a bleach. We want to remove those types of materials with a wet vac or a carpet cleaner or steam cleaner with a chemical that's appropriate for those surfaces and made to clean that type of environment. Disinfect reusable equipment with your solution prior to removal from the site. So after you're done, if you have a vacuum in there, a wet vac, or a steam cleaner that you're using to clean some carpeting, prior to removing it we would take it to our staging area. Prior to removing it from that staging area, you would want to disinfect that item as well, so that we're not bringing a contaminated piece of equipment back into the facilities building or back into stock and claiming it to be ready to go again. So following the sewage spill cleanup, please properly remove and discard of all your PPE that could be contaminated. We want to remove it in such a way so as to avoid any cross-contamination by removing your gloves safely away, turning them inside out. Same thing with the coveralls. Turn it inside out and step out of it, and making sure not to contaminate the clothing underneath. We want to wash our hands thoroughly with soap and water after the removal of all the contaminated PPE and other clothing. And obviously, if you don't have access to a sink right away, some hand sanitizer will do for the time being until you can hit a sink. I got my contact number here at the bottom. Please contact me if there's any questions, or your supervisor. So besides the sewage backup, there's some other cleanup types of details we want to make sure that we just identify. So there's blood or other infectious materials, there's sewage, and then there's clear water, and then what they call black or gray water. So this is kind of a picture. The one on the left looks more like a clear water, though I don't know for sure. It looks like a clear water. We'll cover what that means. And here on the right with the truck submerged, that looks more of like a gray or black water, where there's commingling of several different types of runoff there. It's not just rainwater, there's other things going on here. One other thing to consider is we want to designate an area. So if there's an area where it's commonly folks are walking through or commonly trafficked, we want to make sure that we mark signage off, especially if it's going to be a sort of sustained activity where people are not to be coming in there. We want to notify them that there's a contaminated area that they're walking into, or that we should stop them before they move through here. So any Google search will net a picture similar to the one at the bottom of this screen to post those at the doors or other entranceways, and maybe even if it's serious enough to have somebody step over there to make sure that we're stopping people from entering a contaminated area. Refer to your supervisor for direction in these types of situations. So getting back to that clear water event, if there's a clear water event, it involves some parts of the wastewater system, surface water, groundwater, condensate, roof leaks, steam leaks, potable water leaks, and swimming pools and other water treatment devices. So recommended PPE, or this would be the only one that they're not specifically asking for, like a Tyvek suit, but when in doubt, put the Tyvek suit on. Gloves, some type of waterproof boots, and eye protection for a clear water event. Black and gray water involves fractions and the combinations of all types of wastewater, sewage, dishwater, showers, washing. It can be a combination of all these wastewater stream coming together. Um, those types of events are going to be similar to sewage. Gloves, Tyvek suits, waterproof boots, and goggles that seal around the face or a face shield if there's a splash risk. Buildings with special considerations. This is my last slide. Just something to consider. Obviously, GMS has some other concerns there going on. If there's a standing water event or a water type of event going on there, they have many corrosives, caustics, and other volatile chemicals that might be reactive to water. They might be reactive. They might be causing gas off. There's a bunch of things we want to make sure we know about before we go into that area to clean it. The best contact there is our chemical hygiene officer, Mark Mooser. He's at 4019, and he should be contacted prior to the cleanup of any water event in that building area, especially in the science labs and the non-common areas. Another one to be aware of is the heating plant. As we all know, there's active boilers in that system. That means that there's natural gas being combusted. There's also fuel storage around there. There's an electrical process that runs there. There's steam. There's water under pressure. There's a bunch of things going on. We would want to contact the facilities director or the maintenance manager in charge of that area for direction prior to going in there and starting to cleaning it up. And then I'm going to ask you very kindly to consider anywhere there might be a hazardous chemical or an environment that poses a risk. If there's electrical panels nearby, that's posing a risk in standing water. If there's hazardous chemicals that have been stored in that particular room where the backup is, that poses a unique risk. We need to use our common sense in these circumstances. Contact the supervisor, your supervisor, and then also the supervisor of that particular area prior to starting your cleanup. Please be safe out there. We want you safe. I do not want you hurt. My number is always open for anonymous calls or other issues that you want to bring to my attention, or if you have any questions. Here's my number, 920-403-3436, and my email address. Thank you very much for your time.